Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. Rain streaked the windows, leaving blurred shapes of the city outside, and the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the lingering scent of the day's laundry. Emma had been curled up on the couch, trying to catch up on a novel she'd abandoned weeks ago, when the sound of a bell made her rise with mild irritation. She opened the door to a young delivery man holding a small package. "Package for Emma Hart," he said, his voice polite, almost shy. She smiled automatically, signing for it without a second thought. The box was heavier than she expected, and she carried it into the kitchen. Setting it on the counter. At first, she thought little of it. Deliveries were routine these days: books, household supplies, the occasional gift from friends or distant family. But something about the handwriting on the label seemed familiar. She frowned, running her fingers over the cursive. It wasn't a friend's penmanship. And then, as she carefully unwrapped the box, a small envelope fell out. Her heart skipped. Inside was a note, written in a hand she knew all too well. "I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me tonight." Her hands shook. The note was unsigned, but she knew. She knew. Her husband, Daniel, had been distant lately. Long hours at the office, frequent business trips, little time for her beyond obligatory smiles and polite conversations. Emma had tried to ignore the gnawing suspicion, telling herself it was paranoia, that perhaps she was imagining small signs, reading too much into missed calls and faint perfume scents that weren't hers. Now, the truth was in her hands, delivered literally, like confession she hadn't asked for. Her mind raced, questions spilling into one another. Who sent this? How long had it been going on? Was tonight the first time she would confront reality, or had she been living in denial for months without even realizing it? By evening, Emma's anxiety had transformed into a restless energy. She couldn't bring herself to ask Daniel, not yet. She felt caught between fear and a dark curiosity, a need to witness the truth before reacting. The city lights shimmered through the rain-streaked windows as she debated what to do, her fingers tightening around the envelope. Hours later, she found herself walking down dimly lit streets, her apartment forgotten behind her. The note had directed her to a small cafe in the quieter part of town. Her heart hammered with every step, every sound magnified in the silent drizzle of rain. When she arrived, the place was nearly empty, warm lights spilling onto wet pavement. And then she saw him, Daniel, seated in a shadowed corner, speaking in hushed tones with a woman Emma had never met. Their laughter carried easily through the quiet cafe, intimate and familiar, the kind of laughter that belonged to secrets. Emma froze, a wave of nausea and disbelief crashing over her. The casual familiarity, the subtle touch of hands across the table, the way Daniel's eyes crinkled in a smile meant only for this woman. It was more than enough to confirm every fear she had tried to bury. She wanted to run, to retreat into the safety of ignorance, but some part of her needed to see, to witness, to understand. And so she watched, heart aching, as the man she loved thought she knew shared glances and whispered words meant for someone else. The confrontation was inevitable. Later, back in her apartment, rain dripping from her coat, Emma faced Daniel. Her voice shook as she asked the question she had held in her chest for weeks. The truth tumbled out in fragments, apologies mixed with excuses, confessions of longing and loneliness that Emma could no longer ignore. Daniel admitted it had started, innocently or so he said, but then became something he couldn't resist. A forbidden connection that had grown too quickly, too easily. Emma listened, fury and grief battling with remnants of love and history. She realized the life they had shared, the routines, the memories, the shared dreams, were now shadowed by a betrayal she could not erase. Days turned into weeks, and Emma felt herself unraveling and reassembling in the same breath. She questioned everything: her worth, her judgment, her ability to trust. Yet amidst the turmoil, she found clarity in her own strength. She had the choice to let this define her, to crumble, or to reclaim her life on her terms. In the quiet mornings that followed, Emma began to rebuild, piece by piece. She discovered resilience she hadn't known existed, carving out moments of self-care, revisiting old passions, connecting with friends she had neglected. She confronted Daniel not with vengeance, but with a clear-eyed assertion of her boundaries, a refusal to let betrayal dictate her worth. And somewhere in the quiet, in the heartache and the fire of betrayal, Emma discovered herself anew. The delivery that had brought a note revealing infidelity had, ironically, delivered something else as well, a chance for awakening, for reclaiming desire and passion for herself. She realized she could love again, fiercely, but first she had to honor herself. Though the memory of the betrayal lingered like a shadow, it no longer consumed her. Emma had been delivered the truth in the most unexpected way, and with it came the realization that sometimes life's hardest revelations can also become the most transformative. The leak in trust had been painful, undeniable, yet it had cleared a space inside her, a space ready to be filled with self-respect, passion, and a life lived fully and unreservedly. The days after that rainy afternoon were some of the most difficult Emma had ever faced. Each morning, the sunlight seemed sharper, more revealing, as if the universe itself refused to let her hide from what she had learned. The note, the cafe, the laughter she had overheard, it haunted her, echoing in quiet moments when she tried to focus on work, or even on simple tasks around the apartment. She and Daniel continued to live under the same roof, but the air was heavy, dense with unspoken questions and lingering suspicion. Emma tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, brewing his coffee as she always had, asking about his day with polite smiles, keeping conversations mundane. Yet every glance, every accidental brush of his hand carried the weight of betrayal. She found herself hyper-aware, replaying the cafe scene in her mind, the tilt of Daniel's head, the softness in his voice when he spoke to another woman, the intimacy of gestures that were once reserved for her, one evening unable to bear. The silence, Emma confronted him again. She had waited until Daniel returned from work, his coat damp from rain, briefcase in hand. She wanted honesty, unfiltered, and she demanded it. "Daniel," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I need to know everything. I can't rebuild what's broken if I don't understand the truth." Daniel's face fell, and for the first time, Emma saw real shame in his eyes. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair, and began to speak in halting breaths. The affair, he admitted, had started as a friendship, a connection with someone who seemed to notice him in ways Emma hadn't in recent years. But over time, what should have remained a casual companionship had crossed boundaries, evolving into something neither of them could easily halt. Emma listened, her chest tight, her mind a whirlwind. Anger surged, hot and bright, then subsided into aching sorrow. She realized that the man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with was still human, flawed, drawn to attention she had perhaps unconsciously withheld. And while she did not forgive him immediately, understanding began to settle in, a strange mixture of grief, compassion, and determination. The next weeks became a slow, intricate dance of observation, reflection, and tentative conversation. Emma found herself cataloging moments, the way Daniel glanced at her sometimes, the brief touches that seemed accidental, but spoke of lingering affection, the rare smiles that reached his eyes. She began to understand that while betrayal had fractured their trust, it had not erased the history they shared, the intimacy that had once defined them. During this period, Emma also turned inward. She rediscovered passions she had shelved, painting, long walks through quiet neighborhoods, late-night reading marathons, and reconnecting with friends who reminded her of herself outside of the marriage. These activities weren't distractions, they were reclamations of identity, expressions of the self she had almost lost in the routine of domestic life and the shadow of infidelity. And yet, even amidst her personal rediscovery, the tension with Daniel lingered. There were moments of awkwardness, flashes of raw emotion, bursts of anger that left both exhausted. But there were also moments of tenderness, shared coffee on rainy mornings, quiet conversations about the future and small gestures that spoke. Of an unspoken desire to repair what had been broken. One night, long after midnight, Daniel returned from a late meeting. The apartment was dark, the city quiet, except for the soft hum of streetlights outside the windows. Emma sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a book in her lap, but she hadn't been reading. She had been thinking about trust, forgiveness, love, and the possibility of reigniting something that felt lost. Daniel approached cautiously, the weight of the past hanging between them. "Emma," he whispered, his voice low and sincere. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I want to try if you let me." Emma looked up, studying him. In that moment, she saw the vulnerability she had glimpsed at the cafe months ago, but in a more honest, raw form. She realized that desire and connection weren't just about passion. They were about seeing each other fully, flaws and all, and choosing to stay despite the shadows. She nodded a single deliberate motion, and he sat beside her. They didn't speak immediately. Instead, they simply let themselves exist together, sharing space, warmth, and presence. And then, slowly, the distance between them diminished. Hands found each other, tentative at first, brushing lightly against skin, fingers intertwining. There was an unspoken acknowledgement. This was a chance, fragile but real, to rebuild something that had been tested and nearly broken over the following months. Their relationship evolved into a complex, layered connection built not just on desire but on understanding, honesty, and a renewed willingness to communicate. Every touch, every embrace carried the weight of past mistakes and the promise of deeper intimacy. They laughed together more freely, argued with less venom, and allowed themselves moments of quiet affection that reminded them of why they'd fallen in love in the first place. Emma also discovered a new depth within herself. The pain of betrayal had awakened a courage she hadn't known she possessed, a willingness to confront difficult truths, to reclaim her identity, and to embrace love not as a guarantee of perfection, but as a choice she could make each day. And in those rare, quiet moments when the rain tapped against the windows and the city seemed paused, holding its breath, Emma felt the full, transformative power of desire and connection. Not reckless, not forbidden, but passionate in a way that was rooted in understanding, trust, and the hard-won knowledge of human vulnerability. The delivery that had once brought her heartbreak had, over time, delivered something far greater. The realization that love could survive revelation, that passion could exist alongside forgiveness, and that the human heart was capable of renewal even after the deepest betrayals. Emma understood now that life's most profound awakenings often arrive in unexpected packages, and that the truth, however painful, could also become the foundation for a love more vivid, more intimate, and more enduring than she had ever imagined. In the embrace of her reclaimed love, in the quiet warmth of shared nights and renewed desire, Emma finally allowed herself to surrender not to fear, not to betrayal, but to a passionate, all-consuming love that was entirely, undeniably hers. The days after the revelation felt like living in a suspended world. Emma moved through the apartment almost mechanically, performing routines that once brought comfort but now felt hollow. The coffee machine hissed, the kettle boiled, and the mailbox clattered with bills, but everything felt muted, overshadowed by the memory of that delivery, the unexpected proof of Daniel's betrayal. Yet amidst the ache, there was a strange clarity. She could no longer ignore what she had been missing, the cracks in her marriage that had long gone unnoticed. Emma began journaling late at night, pouring thoughts onto pages in a way she hadn't since college. Writing became a lifeline, a way to separate her desires from her fears, to confront the pain without being consumed by it. She wrote about the woman in the cafe, about the laughter she'd overheard, about the way Daniel's hand lingered on hers in the past yet seemed absent in recent months. Through the words, she realized that her longing was not only about betrayal. It was about connection, intimacy, and being truly seen. One evening, weeks after the discovery, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. The apartment smelled faintly of rain and wet earth, and Emma felt a tension she hadn't expected. He paused at the doorway, hesitant, like a man stepping into unfamiliar territory. "I know things are broken," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to try to understand, to fix what I've damaged." Emma's heart clenched. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but she also wanted to believe in the possibility of repair. She studied his face, the subtle lines of regret, the softening of his eyes, the tension in his jaw, and she realized that love was more than anger, more than betrayal. It was also about willingness, effort, and the courage to face oneself. They began small, almost imperceptible steps toward rebuilding trust. Breakfast became quieter moments of presence, shared cups of tea in the early morning where conversation was deliberate and gentle. Walks in the nearby park offered a space to talk about anything, sometimes work, sometimes memories, sometimes the unspoken tension that lingered like a shadow between them. Every gesture mattered. A hand brushing against another, a quiet laugh shared over a minor inconvenience, a look that conveyed care and attention. Emma also rediscovered herself. She returned to painting, creating canvases full of bold colors and abstract forms, channeling a storm of emotions she had felt. She explored local cafes and small bookstores, reconnecting with friends and acquaintances who reminded her of who she was outside the marriage. She realized that part of the tension with Daniel had stemmed from neglect, not of love, but of attention to her own passions and needs. In reclaiming herself, she found strength and clarity. Meanwhile, Daniel worked to bridge the distance that had grown between them. He truly listened to Emma's frustrations, fears, and aspirations. He admitted where he had failed, acknowledged the subtle ways he had withdrawn, and began making tangible efforts to restore intimacy. Their conversations, once strained and awkward, began to flow again, filled with curiosity, humor, and shared memories. Months passed, and the tension that had once threatened to engulf them evolved into something richer, a careful, deliberate reconnection. Physical affection returned, tentative at first, hands resting briefly on the back of a chair, an arm around a shoulder, a brush of fingers, but each touch carried more weight, more meaning. They were no longer simply lovers or partners. They were two people choosing each other daily, aware of the past but refusing to be imprisoned by it. One rainy evening, reminiscent of the day she had discovered the affair, Emma and Daniel found themselves cooking dinner together. The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs, the windows fogged with condensation. They laughed over minor mishaps, the lid slipping from Daniel's hands, Emma accidentally spilling a bit of sauce, yet every glance was charged with the intimacy of regained trust. After dinner, they settled on the couch, rain tapping rhythmically against the windows. Emma leaned against Daniel, feeling the warmth of his body, the quiet steadiness that had always been part of their bond. Words were unnecessary. Years of shared life, coupled with the journey of healing, created a connection deeper than any fleeting passion could have offered. "I never stopped loving you," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I know," Emma replied, closing her eyes, letting herself feel the truth of his words. "I never stopped wanting to try." That night, the intimacy between them blossomed naturally. It was not the reckless desire or forbidden temptation, but a slow, deliberate surrender to the rediscovered closeness they had both nurtured. Every touch, every look, every heartbeat was a reminder that love true, passionate love was not the absence of pain, but the courage to navigate it together. In the weeks and months that followed, their relationship settled into a rhythm that balanced desire, trust, and deep emotional connection. Shared projects around the apartment, long walks in the city, quiet evenings with music or books, each ordinary moment was now infused with the extraordinary awareness of each other's presence. Emma understood that passion was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was the quiet, unwavering choice to see and cherish one another despite life's challenges. Through it all, Emma realized the delivery that had once shattered her world had delivered something far greater. The knowledge that love, once fractured, could be rebuilt with honesty, effort, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability. The past remained, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it became a foundation, a testament to resilience, understanding, and the depth of connection that could survive even the most difficult trials. And in those moments when the rain tapped against the windows and the city outside seemed to pause, Emma felt it fully, the exhilarating, consuming, an enduring power of a passionate love that was no longer about secrets or betrayal, but about the deliberate choice to surrender to one another, heart and soul, fully, completely, and without fear. The weeks after the revelation blurred together in a haze of unease and self-reflection. Emma moved through her apartment as if in a dream, observing small details she had once ignored, the way the morning light fell across the kitchen tiles, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of her own breathing. Daniel's betrayal had unsettled everything, but it also forced her to confront truths she had long avoided. She began to notice patterns she had overlooked, the way Daniel distractedly checked his phone, the way conversations in the evenings became perfunctory, the way they had stopped sharing dreams and little jokes that had once defined their closeness. Her heart ached not just from betrayal, but from the absence of emotional intimacy. Emma realized that longing is rarely about a single event. It is often about the slow erosion of connection, a quiet emptiness that grows until it cannot be ignored. Emma started to reclaim her own sense of self. She returned to painting and sketching, spending hours with brushes and colors that mirrored the chaos and calm she felt inside. She visited local bookstores, wandered through small cafes, and reconnected with friends whose presence reminded her of the vibrancy of life outside her marriage. In these moments, she discovered a strength she hadn't realized she possessed, the capacity to feel deeply, to confront pain, and to seek fulfillment without solely depending on Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel began to make tangible efforts to repair their fractured bond. He listened in ways he hadn't before, asking questions about her day, her thoughts, her feelings, without interruption or defensiveness. He admitted mistakes, acknowledged his distance, and shared his own regrets, creating a space for vulnerability that had been absent for months. Slowly, the apartment's air, once tense and heavy, began to shift. Subtle laughter returned, small gestures of affection were reintroduced, and the familiar warmth of shared life began to reappear. Emma and Daniel's interactions, once strained and cautious, began to evolve into something more profound. Small moments became charged with meaning. A hand brushing lightly against another while passing dishes, a lingering glance over morning coffee, a gentle squeeze of the shoulder as they passed in the hallway. Each touch, each look, rebuilt layers of trust brick by brick. Emma realized that intimacy is often found not in grand gestures, but in the quiet consistency of presence, attentiveness, and understanding. One rainy afternoon, reminiscent of the day that had changed everything, Daniel surprised her by preparing a simple lunch. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the apartment, blending with the earthy aroma of rain. They sat at the small kitchen table, sharing food and conversation, and for the first time in months, there was no tension, only a steady, deepened connection. "I've missed this," Daniel said softly, pushing his chair slightly closer. "Us." Emma's heart swelled. "I've missed it too," she admitted, her voice trembling with honesty. "More than I realized." From that day forward, their bond deepened in both subtle and extraordinary ways. They cooked together, cleaned together, laughed at minor mishaps, and celebrated small victories in their daily routines. The apartment became a sanctuary of shared life, filled with warmth, trust, and a rekindled sense of closeness. Their conversations ranged from mundane topics to dreams they had long shelved, hopes for the future, and candid reflections on their journey of rebuilding. One evening, the rain fell softly against the windows, the city outside blurred by sheets of mist. Emma and Daniel curled together on the sofa, the quiet hum of the apartment providing a cocoon of intimacy. Words were unnecessary. Years of shared life and the slow healing process had created a bond deeper than any fleeting passion. Daniel brushed a stray lock of hair from Emma's face, his fingers lingering, and she felt a current of desire tempered by the profound love that had been restored. The rekindled intimacy was not reckless. It was deliberate, tender, and consuming. Each touch was meaningful, each glance weighted with emotion, each embrace a reaffirmation of their choice to reconnect and cherish one another. They learned to communicate without words, reading subtle cues and expression, posture and gesture, allowing desire and love to flow naturally. Emma discovered that passion could be slow, patient, and enduring. It was in the quiet moments of togetherness. Sharing a meal, preparing the apartment for the evening, or simply sitting in silence while holding hands. It was in the knowing glances exchanged across rooms, the warmth of a shoulder against another, the steady heartbeat of someone who truly sees and cherishes you. As months passed, their marriage transformed. The betrayal that had once threatened to shatter their world became a touchstone, a reminder of vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to confront pain. Emma and Daniel learned that love is not the absence of mistakes or betrayal, but the choice to face them together, to heal, and to allow desire and intimacy to flourish anew. One evening, as the city lights twinkled through rain-specked windows, Emma rested her head on Daniel's chest. The apartment smelled of lavender and the faint aroma of dinner that lingered from earlier. They held each other, hearts beating in quiet unison, and Emma realized the truth. The intensity of desire had returned, but it was now fused with trust, understanding, and a profound emotional connection. In that moment, as their fingers intertwined and the world outside faded, Emma understood the depth of what they had rebuilt. Passion, when nurtured with care, honesty, and love, could transform even ordinary life into something extraordinary. And in Daniel's embrace, with the soft hum of the city around them, Emma surrendered completely to the consuming, breathtaking, enduring force of a passionate loved one that had been tested, healed, and made stronger by every trial they had faced together.